He was used to the world bowing at his feet, but nothing could have prepared him for the moment he looked across a small-town diner and recognized the woman holding his coffee pot. What happens when a billionaire is suddenly pulled back into his past by the one person he never expected to see again? Where are you watching from? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more unforgettable stories. The neon lights of New York shimmered through the towering glass windows of Daniel Carter's penthouse, painting streaks of gold across the skyline. Daniel, 50 years old and one of the richest men in America, had just closed a deal worth over $1 billion. Another win, another headline. And yet, as he leaned back in his leather chair, staring out at the city he owned piece by piece, he felt nothing but an emptiness gnawing at his chest. His assistant, Brandon, stepped in briskly with a folder in hand. "Mr. Carter, your jet is fueled and ready for Tennessee. Shall I confirm?" Daniel tapped his fingers on the desk, his eyes unfocused. For reasons he couldn't name, he heard himself saying, "Cancel it. I'm staying a little longer." Brandon froze, startled. "Sir, that meeting is critical." Daniel turned back to the window, his voice low. Some things matter more than meetings. But he couldn't explain what exactly was pulling him away. An hour later, Daniel sat in the back of a black town car, his driver, Elijah, at the wheel. The city's bright towers faded into country highways, and his chest tightened with every mile closer to Nashville. It had been over 15 years since he'd set foot in the town he once swore he'd never return to. Nashville was where it all began, where he hustled newspapers on corners, where he hid library books under his jacket just to study business magazines, where every night he'd whispered to himself, "I'll never come back until I've made it big." Now, with billions in his bank and his name on fortune covers, here he was, heading straight into the place he'd abandoned. But as Elijah turned down a quiet street, Daniel's eyes locked on a building that made his chest pound. A flickering neon sign still buzzed above the doorway. Maggie's Diner. It looked the same, like time had left it untouched, and memories swarmed back like bees around an open jar. Could he really face the ghosts waiting inside? "Elijah, stop here," Daniel ordered, his voice distant. He stepped out into the cool evening air, his Italian shoes crunching against the cracked pavement. The bell above the door jingled as he pushed it open, and the smell hit him. Coffee, bacon grease, something fried on the griddle. It was exactly as he remembered. The same scuffed booths, the same humming ceiling fan, the same worn red vinyl in the corner where he once sat, dreaming of skyscrapers and escape. He slid into that booth, staring out at the neon globe leading through the window. But then a voice interrupted his thoughts. Soft, yet steady. "What can I get you, sir?" Daniel turned, and the world tilted. She wore a simple waitress uniform, her brown hair pulled into a messy bun, her tired green eyes shadowed by years of wear. But beneath the fatigue, he knew her instantly. Rachel Miller, his old friend, the girl who once sat beside him in every class, sketching out plans of the future on lined notebook paper, swearing she'd make it out too. She was brilliant, ambitious, alive with fire. But now she stood before him with a notepad in hand, looking like time had stolen more from her than he could bear. His voice cracked despite himself. "Steak and coffee," he said quickly, covering his shock. She nodded, scribbled, and walked away. He watched every step, hardly believing it. 15 years, and Rachel Miller was still here. But why? When she returned with his plate, Daniel's heart pounded. "Rachel," he said quietly. She froze, her eyes scanning his face. "How do you know my name?" Daniel leaned forward, his voice gentle but charged. "Westwood High, class of 2005. Recognition flashed in her eyes, followed by disbelief. Her hand trembled as she set the plate down. "Daniel! Daniel Carter!" I managed a small smile, Not the billionaire's grin that made headlines, but the boyish one she had known long ago. The one and only. Rachel's lips parted in shock. "You're that Daniel Carter, the billionaire!" Her tone carried awe, but Daniel only felt an ache settle deep in his chest. "I never thought you'd see me again," she whispered. "You made it out. I always knew you would." He searched her eyes. "I didn't expect you to still be here." Her smile faltered. "Some of us don't get second chances." Her words cut him sharper than any deal gone bad. What had happened to her dream? They sat together for hours as the diner emptied, their voices weaving between past and present. He asked the question that had haunted him since she walked up to his booth. "Rachel, what happened? You were going to change the world." She stared down at her hands, her voice trembling as she answered. "My father died when I was in my second year at Harvard. My mom got sick right after, and my little brother was still in high school. I had to come back. I dropped out to take care of them, and I've been here ever since." Daniel felt his chest tighten. The girl who once dreamed as big as he had been dragged back into a life she never wanted, trading her fire for responsibility. He swallowed hard. "And you gave up everything?" Rachel's eyes shone with unshed tears. "I didn't give it up. Life took it." Her voice broke, and the silence between them screamed louder than words. That night, Daniel lay awake in his Nashville hotel, staring at the ceiling just as he had in his New York penthouse. But this time, his thoughts weren't of billion-dollar deals. They were of Rachel, the girl who had dreamed beside him, who had been forced to bury her future under family obligations. He couldn't shake the image of her tired eyes, her weary smile. And for the first time in years, Daniel Carter felt powerless. But was he? 2 mornings later, Rachel found a black envelope tucked beneath her windshield wiper. The lettering on the front shimmered in gold. "Meet me at 9 a.m., Carter Enterprises." Her heart thudded as she turned it over in her hands. Should she go? Was this pity? Or was it something more? Curiosity won. She arrived at his sleek skyscraper office, her diner uniform traded for her only pressed blouse. The view from the top floor stunned her. The whole city stretched below her like a dream she once had. Daniel rose from behind his desk as she entered, his gaze softening. "Rachel," he said, his voice low, "I want to offer you something." Her throat tightened. "A job?" He nodded, sliding a folder across the desk. "Not just any job. A managerial role. 6 figures, full benefits. And I'll cover your mother's medical bills and your brother's tuition." Rachel stared at the papers, her hands trembling. "Why would you do this?" Daniel's eyes held hers. "Because you were always meant for more than Maggie's diner." Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "You can't just fix my life with money." Daniel leaned closer, his voice firm. "This isn't about money. It's about giving you back the chance life stole from you." But just as Rachel began to find hope in his offer, a shadow fell over their fragile reunion. Daniel's ruthless rival Victor Wallace had heard whispers of Rachel. Victor wasn't just interested in crushing Daniel's company, he wanted to use Rachel to do it. He dangled an offer before her, wealth, fame, and power beyond her imagination, but at a devastating price. All she had to do was betray Daniel. Could Rachel walk away from hardship into instant luxury, or would the cost of that choice haunt her forever? Night after night, Rachel wrestled with the decision. Victor's promise of freedom pressed against Daniel's quiet faith in her. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at bills stacked high, her mother coughing in the next room, her brother asking about college. The temptation burned. Could she really turn down everything she ever dreamed of? But then she remembered Daniel's eyes the night he told her she was more than her circumstances. He had offered her more than a job. He had offered her belief, and no one had ever given her that before. Still doubt not, would belief be enough to carry her through the storms? The next morning, Rachel walked into Carter Enterprises, her stomach twisting. Daniel stood by his office window when she entered, his posture rigid. He turned, his gaze piercing. "I know about Victor's offer." Rachel's breath caught. He continued, his voice calm but steady. "He can promise you the world, Rachel, but what he's offering comes at a cost, and only you can decide what that cost means to you." Her knees weakened under the weight of his words. He stepped closer. "I'm not offering you pity. I'm offering you partnership. Not because you need saving, but because I see in you the same fire that used to push me forward. The choice is yours." The silence between them pulsed like a heartbeat. Rachel's chest heaved, tears threatening again. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "No, I won't take his offer." Daniel's shoulders relaxed, his expression softening into the smallest smile. "Then you've chosen yourself," he said quietly. Relief and determination washed over her as the weight of her indecision lifted. For the first time in years, Rachel felt she wasn't trapped. She was choosing her own path, her own worth. And sitting across from Daniel, she realized it wasn't about money or power. It was about the courage to believe again. 1 year later, Rachel sat across from Daniel in that same corner booth at Maggie's diner. Only now she wore a crisp blazer instead of a diner apron. Her brother away at college, her mother's health improving, her future her own again. Daniel lifted his coffee cup, and for the first time in decades, his smile wasn't empty, it was real. Rachel's laughter filled the diner, light and unburdened, and Daniel felt something he hadn't in years: peace. Together, they had faced temptation, loss, and fear, and together they had found redemption. For Daniel Carter and Rachel Miller, the past was no longer a weight, but a foundation. The future was no longer uncertain, but full of promise. And as the neon sign flickered above the diner, they knew this was not an ending, but the perfect beginning of something new.